Throughout history, the pen has been a tool for the artist, the politician, the author, and most importantly, the dreamer. The ink within is the lifeblood of illustrations, the written word, and mathematical equations, allowing those who would understand a glimpse into worlds other than their own. What worlds will you create while playing with ink? Hi, I'm Plutach.
And I'm Nayruan.
And I'm Elliot from InkBladePublishing.
And this is Playing with Ink.
Ah.
And yeah. So it took us 4 times to do that for some reason. But yeah, we're here to talk about world building. And last episode we discussed what world building is to our community. Now we're going to go really into the specifics of what different worlds people have created and what world building means to them. So we have Elliot here, who has created Gothica, and I personally really like Gothica. I think it is so cool. But Elliot, if you want to give us a little summary of what Gothica is and just hit the highlights. I mean, we're going to be talking about it all episodes. So if you just want to give us a quick summary, and then we'll go deeper.
Of course, sure. Thank you for having me for starters. But yes, so Gothica is a 5e dark fantasy, dark fantasy 5e compatible game. So basically, it's a whole new world, whole new setting. It's inspired by Victorian sort of England. It's not in Victorian England. It is in a fantasy world, so there's magic and things, and it's not based around like the current state of affairs or anything, or back in like the olden times England, but it takes a lot of things from that. One of the big things it takes is plagues and diseases. So Gothica's, I wanted it to be a series of TTRPGs. So the first installment is Gothica Plague World, and this introduces the sort of main mechanics around the plagues and diseases, and these will hopefully carry on through the further editions, which will introduce more stuff. But yeah, so think Victorian bubonic plagues, dark alleyways, lots of good stuff.
It's so cool. So cool. So we're going to ask all of our guests this, but what do you think world building means, and how does it affect you while you're exploring, writing, or playing in your world? And this is a very general question, and you can answer it however you want to take it.
Sure. So I've written a couple of notes and I'll sort of talk about those, I suppose. To me, because I'm not a writer or much of a reader really, the sort of most of my reading sticks to these TTRPG guides. But I think there's a lot of lore and a lot of story in those. So I feel like the beauty of writing a TTRPG guide is that you can world build kind of to your heart's content, and you can leave these little like loopholes and sort of branching pathways, because the idea is that you eventually hand this over to GMs and players and they fill in the gaps, or they take your pathways and they continue them with their own stories. And I think that's really neat, that you can essentially create a story that you don't have to finish yourself, and you can build a world which you don't have to finish, because if you finished it, then there's no point then handing it over to players other than they're playing through what you've already written, which might be a little bit boring if people read ahead or anything. So I think that's really interesting. Sort of a way to approach world building is through these TTRPGs.
That is
Yeah,
very
that's super cool.
That's very interesting, because you're giving room or acknowledging the fact that players more or less tell the story during their adventures and things like that. So that's
Exactly. Yeah.
So that's pretty good. That's
And I feel like the more that, again, I'm speaking from sort of personal experience, that the more I delve into my own setting and world, the more it opens up. So if you want to work, I sort of work mechanically. So try and get game mechanics to work first, and then talk about how does this fit into the lore. and often those game mechanics sort of introduce pieces of story and lore, because it's like, oh, if this character class does this, how does it fit into the world? And then you think, well, maybe I have to make room, but then that might introduce a few different sort of branching pathways, and you think, oh no, this is really interesting. You follow those, you fill it out as much as you need to, and you think, okay, this is suitable information, so now we can hand it over to the players and let them play with it. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
uh,
That's kind of what I do when I create my characters, you know? I know one of my first D&D characters I created was a Circle of the Wildfire Druid. And I created her because I really liked the mechanics of the class and I made the lore around the mechanics, you know? So I
Mhm.
think that is one of the not if not there's a good way to approach world building, character making and mechanics, but I think it's one of like the more one of the better ways to approach it if that's the mindset you're going for is going mechanics putting mechanics into lore because then I feel like the whole story and the world runs smoothly if you can explain the lore with mechanics and if you can explain the mechanics with the lore. So,
Definitely, I feel like because you're making a game and not a book, like you have to have that little bit of synergy between the two. And there's definitely times where I've created the lore and then thought, oh, hang on, this works really cool for a character class or a magic spell or an item. So then it sort of filters its way into the game side of things. So I feel like you could definitely come at it from both sides of it. But personally, I always go mechanics then lore normally, as a whole.
mhm.
But it's definitely it's a really interesting way to do it.
Yeah, it's so cool.
Hmm.
so you talk about going like mechanics. So is that more or less like oh, what am I trying to do here? So you come up with an interesting mechanic per se,
Sure.
and from just like give me an example within Gothica.
Okay, so probably the main focus was that I had a quick look at what does Gothica want to do, because at that point I was like, it's a dark fantasy game, it's Victorian-esque, it started to build, and I was like, okay, what is the main features of Victorian? There was a lot of sickness, so I looked at the D&D manual, and there was like one page of diseases, and I was like, whoa, there's like 300 pages here, and there's like this tiny, tiny section on diseases, and I was like, and as far as like my personal experience and like the podcasts and like actual plays I listen to, not many people talked about diseases. You know, the if you have it, it's like a magical thing, and then in the same thing, you wave it away with magic, and it's like a curse. So this was like, okay, let's get more medical and more scientific, and let's bring in diseases. And with that, I was like, okay, how does the disease affect every sort of point of the game? So you've got it can affect characters, it can affect the world, and then it can affect like the monsters and creatures that exist in the world. So then from that one idea, you have like things like I have the plagued creature trait. So this kind of came from a few different sort of reasons why I wanted to bring this up or make this in the first place was essentially you're going to have a list of all the different diseases and plagues. Each one of those will have a list of moves, and they link that, or they have a challenge rating requirement. So, say you have 20 new passive abilities or active abilities, they can be dropped on like any creature you wish. So, and this goes back to old D&D. You know, you've got your sort of D&D favorites, Beholder or something.
Hmm.
You could take the weaker ones and give them something that they don't have normally, and then they have essentially you are plaguing this creature, but it gives them access to new abilities, which then offers the chance to spread the plague to your characters. But
Mm.
I think the fun part is that it stops a lot of like metagaming, because it's like, hey, I've played, kobolds, I've fought these hundreds of times, or goblins, but it's like these goblins carry this particular trait, which allows them to have these two new moves, and it's like they might be poisonous to touch or something, and it then trails on to new mechanics involving all of like the new plague stuff. So it sort of builds upon, like you start with the one little idea as a concept, and it's like, okay, plagues, how does that work in all these different aspects? And then you go from here, and then you sort of keep sort of pushing it until you have like something that works as a system, but also keeps in with the law.
That's so cool. What kind of inspirations like like you said, more biological and like medical diseases now. There's a lot of magical diseases out there. I mean, even
Yeah.
like in Baldur's Gate 3, I mean, many of the characters have some sort of magical disease. But I think it's very interesting in a fantasy world to put real life biology and medical like research. So, like, I guess my question is, do what diseases in the real world have you like taken and put in this game, but have you been like careful with it at all and like depending on like different triggers? Like this is a loaded question.
Yeah.
but but like
Definitely.
um what diseases in the real world have inspired you and how have you changed that within your setting?
Sure. So one of the biggest things is I wanted Gothica to be as family friendly as possible. It might be difficult with the sort of context or the content, but I think it's easy to go down a route of everything is super dark and deadly and horrifying, and I didn't want that for this because it's like it's a dark fantasy and it's a dark sort of content or context, sort of the material. But I think in a way that you can describe things, yes, you can still be a little bit gory, but you don't have to be grotesque. And you can avoid, and it's what I'm trying to do anyway, is avoid diseases that replicate real life diseases, especially ones that may
Mm,
carry trauma or sort of life changing, with mutations in the game, you might grow a new arm. It's kind of difficult to do that in real life. So it's like you can go around it and you can still be humorous. And, you know, I feel like with the idea that trying to keep the game to be played however people want to play it, if they want to play it as a serious sort of dark fantasy, or do they want to play it as a dark fantasy that has an element of humor? Um, you know, growing a new arm and being covered in boils can be really serious, or it can be, oh no, this is hilarious that my friend over there now has three arms and he's trying to hide one in his coat. So there's a lot of there's a lot of real life diseases which I don't want to take inspiration from. There's
yeah.
a lot of basic things I want to take inspiration from. So you have like basic afflictions and conditions, like common colds, flus, sort of things that, yes, they're present in most everyday life, but hopefully they're not too traumatic for the general player. And even if they are, I think with the sort of content that Gothica deals with, it's a good sort of chance to talk to your players, talk to the table. And if there's something that is that that, hey, did you suffer from anything in prior? If they're happy to mention that, then stay well clear of that. And it's like, because you're tailoring the adventure yourself, if there's a character that suffered or someone that they have sort of a family member have suffered of something similar, just completely avoid it. And I think you can still play this kind of game and have like the freedom to involve diseases, mutations in conditions, but without hopefully traumatizing people even further.
Yeah.
Definitely
Yeah.
like definitely like so we use this game as escapism. A lot of us do. To be
Mm,
able to get away from our problems, real world problems. So it's good that you can set up these boundaries within that as well. Um,
yes.
one thing that we mentioned, kind of going back to your inspiration. So you are from the UK.
Yes, I am.
Um, absolutely lovely place. I had a chance to visit the UK and Ireland in 2016. One
Ooh,
thing that both me and you have in common is we love exploring caves or forests or things like that. I read
yes.
I did some sleuthing and read your bio. So
Okay, yeah,
so,
yeah.
so what's some of your
Stalker.
let's let's go to real uh let's go to real world things, real world
Yeah,
locations. What are some real world locations around you that helped inspire Gothica, like some of the ruins or forest or caves in which you've been in?
sure. I live mostly in the countryside, so I have a lot of access to old woodlands, and there's a significant amount of old abbeys and churches, some still in use, some sort of half derelict. So they'll have like the ancient parts of these old abbeys, and they have like, as much as they can, they have the imagination of this was this area, this is the courtyard, this is the sort of the cloisters. Um, And it's really interesting to go and see those things because I'm fortunate enough that sort of my country looks after a lot of those heritage sort of locations,
Hmm.
and for me to just go and visit most of the time for free as well, which is really great for people who are just it's going there for inspiration, but it's also a day out, so it's nice and fun. But to go there and see this sort of touch of history, and if they have sort of notes or information on what the people were doing there, what there might have been a particular job that the monks or people, whoever was in this location, they were doing. It's really interesting because you don't get a lot of that because it's localized history. So it's even if you're on holiday in an area, you're sort of you get to get a small glimpse of the history and you get to walk around it as well. So it's not like you're just sitting there, you're reading about it, doing research, which is obviously important for a lot of things because there's a lot of things I can't. I can't visit the Victorian age, but I can go to a museum or something. But these sort of historical sites and these old woodlands, they're really interesting because as soon as you step into them, for me, I'm flooded with ideas, and I think that's probably pretty common. If your headspace is already thinking, I need inspiration from somewhere, and then you reach a place which is Gothic in nature, you look at things differently, or I do personally, and think, wow, this, you can start to picture gargoyles and vampires on the top of sort of spires, and you think, wow, yeah, I could be an adventurer walking up now across this gravel pathway. And then if you sort of take note of the surroundings, so standing on the gravel, the wind hitting the trees nearby, and you think, this is daytime, but if it was night, where would the moon land? So yeah, visiting a lot of these locations is a huge, huge inspiration, and I'm very grateful that I live in an area that has a lot of this stuff. But I guess I chose old England, so living in England is it's pretty easy that they would have stuff for me to go and look at.
I didn't get a chance to see any of the spots around England. I did get to
Mm,
visit St. Andrews and the the
okay.
ruins of the old cathedral there, and got to go up in the tower. And
Yes.
that was the first thing when you started talking about ruins and everything. My mind went immediately
Mm,
back to that. So it was
yeah.
it was something. It was absolutely beautiful, especially standing there looking at the North Sea.
Wow.
Uh,
Yeah, that's incredible.
let's see, Plutarch.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry, I was looking at the questions. Yeah, well, I also got to visit the UK
That's right, you did, didn't you?
a few years ago, and yeah, and we mostly went to see, all the iconic spots for like Tolkien, Lewis.
Oh,
Huge fan of Tolkien and Lewis, obviously.
I
So
want to
we
go
got
to
to go to the Rabbit
Oxford.
Room, but we also yes. We also got to go to we drove around the countryside a lot because we went to Bath, which is not like Victorian in nature, but it has the it's the Greekish Roman
Mm.
esque kind of vibe because that's what it is. Um, did you take any inspiration from besides the Victorian age? Uh, yeah.
Yeah, so I went originally I wanted to have, again, speaking of it being like a series, I wanted it to move in time a little bit. So originally I started Georgian, which is the previous era. There's
Mhm.
not a huge difference. It's mostly sort of there's like slight differences in technology, but it's like mostly fashion sense and sort of the way of living. I haven't gone as far back as sort of before then, but I guess what's sort of I guess sort of relevant is that the way I'm dealing with the sort of being Victorian and having it in a D&D sort of game setting is that the world at the moment is split. So a lot of the stuff currently in the human sort of controlled lands is has advanced to that Victorian style of technology and era. But everything that was once human controlled or was a thriving kingdom that has turned into the plague lands is sort of lost in that ancient sort of more medieval time. So if you travel from outside of the Haven lands, which is the core sort of center of the map, the further you go, the more older it gets, or the older it gets. So that's when you're going to reach like the sort of more Middle Ages. You've got castles, you've got abandoned churches and things. Whereas like the Haven lands is more Victorian era. But to go back to your question, Plutach, I haven't taken any inspiration from like beyond that. And there's definitely some sort of smaller pieces where I
Mm-hmm.
think, oh, this is 14th century. I'm going to steal that because no one's probably really going to fact check me, and there's no real reason that it can't be involved. But we had a funny thing we had our weapons post with a few sort of blueprints of weapons, flintlock weaponry, and someone commented saying, "Oh, you're using X and Y flintlock with this and this." I was like, "Oh no, someone's actually like a historian in like firearms, and they're questioning it already." I'm like, "Oh no, this is like so early days for this." But yeah, so there's going to be people out there that are history buffs, and they're thinking, "Oh, you've mixed this with that," but that's the beauty of it being in a fantasy world and not set in like modern day or set on our planet, because then it's like I can do whatever I want. Like if this is from a totally different era, that's in there because I say it is, and it's cool. So yeah, I might look into the Bath thing, because Bath is definitely it's quite unique, isn't it, as a sort of
Yeah,
English
that's
city
I was
still.
wondering if you took like any inspiration from the very unique locations in England, and I don't know when they discovered Bath specifically,
Mm,
like the Roman ruins of Bath, but there is some very unique stuff. So I was wondering if you were gonna like if your plan, this is very far in the future, obviously, but if
sure.
do you plan to like put like different kind of unique areas similar to like Bath if you're taking
Mm.
inspiration from the UK?
I am now. This is
Okay.
this is definitely an idea that I should probably be looking into. I think location wise, that's one of my last concerns at the moment. I've kind of done the broad
Yeah.
brushstrokes of this is the area kingdom, then this is that one, then this is that one, and I haven't really sort of localized things to cities yet. So for sure, I think that's such a great idea.
Okay.
So thank you.
Um, no problem, I guess.
I'll credit you in
Yeah.
the back of the book.
Okay, sweet.
I
Uh,
guess. Hmm. Yeah, I knew absolutely nothing about Bath, so I learned a little bit right there. So,
It's really
yeah,
interesting.
I was very, very lucky to go visit the Roman baths and stuff. It was super cool. If you ever get the chance, I recommend it. There's a
uh,
lot of history there.
you know, I should put a
It's
little
really cool.
asterisk besides saying I visited England, because more or less we landed in Heathrow
Okay.
and
Yes.
got on a train, and
Yep.
9 hours later I was getting off a train in Aviemore. So,
Wow.
so
So
I did.
you saw it through the window of the train.
Yeah, I saw it through the window of the train and out the window of the airplane. So,
Yep.
but never actually got to see any of the sites
Uh,
around England. So
it-
unfortunate for that. But um,
it's a bugger to drive around. So I know America's a bit different with sort of straighter roads, and you're I think you're more used to the long drives. Where for us, a long drive, like is probably 2 or 3 hours. Whereas to you guys, that probably seems like really it's like quite a short one.
Yeah, it's short.
So like
we
6 hours for us will get us from like one side of the country to the other. But it's like that to us
Yeah.
and our mentality, that's kind of insane, because like you don't do that every week. Like some people
Yeah.
probably do, but most people will not.
no, it was
Yeah, crazy.
we got to ride around. We drove in Scotland. Um,
Mm.
so I don't know. In Ireland was something. Driving around, and then there's a sheep in the middle of the road screaming at us. So,
Yes. Yeah, yeah.
but
Wales is also very bad for that.
um, but
But
again, that it was an awesome experience, and I both of you talking about it now, I'm like, where was it? Where was this Roman baths at? How did I not know about this? So again, history lesson.
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Uh,
It's also a really just a fun fact. It's also a town that really celebrates Jane Austen for some reason,
Okay.
and I don't know why. There was like a thing with Jane Austen in Bath. I think it was in Bath. Maybe I'm just mixing my memories. This was like a long time ago. Never mind. I'm gonna shut up now. I
The
might
fact
be saying
checkers are
something
coming
that's
for you
wrong.
now.
Yes.
The comments to be like, that's not Bob.
That's not correct.
the
I
Flint
apologize. I
the
apologize.
Flint Rock was wrong. Bath is wrong. 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 Bunch of
All of this is wrong.
fact checkers to the internet. God bless you.
Yeah.
Uh, so a little bit of history too. What again? So your first introduction to TTRPGs was AD&D Second Edition with your
I
brother.
believe so. Like, yeah, I'm not super sure. I think it was that. I I remember playing the game and I remember hating it because I didn't know what the heck I was doing. And suddenly having a lot of, I played board games a lot. Talisman was a really good one that I enjoyed. I played that days on end. If you ever get the chance to play that, very good. But other than that, it was a lot of video games, lots of card games, and then suddenly this D&D thing came along, and it's you can do whatever you want. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? Like, where's the rules? Where, if I take a turn, I can only do this, surely. And it's like, no, like, you have to do, you have to say what you want to do. And I thought the freedom at that age scared me because it's like, I don't know what you want me to do, basically. And I walk into the room and then it's full of traps. And my brother says, well, you didn't check for the traps. And I think, well, I thought you were going to tell me there was traps. And it's like, no, you have to like forward plan. And I was like, I don't understand. So I came away with a really bad impression of D&D. And then much later on in life, a few friends basically turned around and said, hey, do you want to make a game for us? Because I got a lot of friends that hadn't played it. There was a couple that had, and somehow they convinced me to be the GM. And my experience was listening to Critical Role and getting through like half of season one, and then being like, "Oh, you must know how to play." I'm like, I've listened to a lot of hours, so yeah. And
Half of season
being
1 is like 500 hours, so
that's a lot,
it's
yeah,
it's a lot.
I've
yeah,
I've yet to tackle it. I started with season 2 and tried to make it through season 1, and then halfway through campaign 3 right now. So
nice.
I'm
I think it was
almost done with campaign 3. I've watched I yeah. I've put so many hours into watching Critical Role, but that is besides the point.
yeah. So was that
I
was
think
that your like more or less the triggering point that made you think, oh yes, TTRPGs, this is something I love, this is my passion. Was that it, or was your
it
friend?
definitely it definitely started. Sorry to cut you off. I'm just so passionate.
No, you're good.
It was definitely a spark, I would say. As soon as I was like, "Hey, you're going to be the GM," I was like, oh, "Okay, sure." Um, I hadn't done a lot of creative writing. I was more into arts and crafts, drawing and stuff like that, painting. Although my painting's awful, so just drawing. I don't know why I said painting. That's a false claim. Um, but the idea of suddenly creating a little world was super cool because there was a lots of games where like talk about like old Halo and stuff where you would create a world using their forge maps and you'd create all these little
Mm,
games. I always used to do that, so I was always the friend that created the game. And not really knowing much about D&D for many years, that was never something I pursued. Given the chance, I said, okay, sit down, wrote a short sort of story of like, okay, I want characters to start here, they're going to end about here, let's see how this works. We sort of bumbled through a few games, and then I realized like this is actually super cool. I tried being a player, and I was like, I don't like that because I realized the fun and enjoyment I get from it is creating the world and letting people play with it, and sitting back and saying like, oh
Mhm.
yes, like finding out what people do, using their little moments of joy as like, oh, like you sort of become the proud father, and it's like,
hmm
oh, look at these, they're enjoying my thing, and there's like that satisfaction level of like people actually like the stuff that I'm creating, and it was fun to create and it's fun to play with, and it's to me that's such an awesome experience.
It
Um,
it's such a different world because when you're behind the DM screen and you think for just a moment, like I would love to be with these players in front of me, like having the shenanigans, things like that. Oh, that seems so cool. And then you do it, you get on that side, and you're like, I don't think this is for me. I'd much rather be on. It's like these guys are
It means you're a control
chuckleheads.
freak. That's what it means.
yeah.
Maybe.
I'm joking. I'm
No,
joking.
no. There's some truth in that. There is some truth. You want to be the one
Definitely.
that there is something in knowing the world and being able to share it from behind that screen, um, and then allowing your players to make it their own in a way.
Mm.
It gives you that satisfaction. It gives you the proud father feeling, because they take
Yeah.
this
Or the
and run with it.
disappointed.
Or disappointed. Yeah.
Or disappointed.
Yes.
I
But yeah, I get the feeling I've been DMing for about 5 years now. So,
Wow,
but I've
nice.
also been playing for 5 years. I DM as much as I play.
Mm.
So, I think I get the best of both worlds, and I don't know which I prefer because I also love learning about other people's worlds. I mean, this is why we made this podcast so we could sit here and learn and listen to people talk about their worlds. So I love like hearing these things that people have created. So I'm very much a note taker. So I have tons and tons of notebooks of just lore people have created in my games that they run. And so I find it interesting that you guys really like creating the lore. And I like creating the lore too. You know, I have my own world I'm making and I run games, but I find it so cool sitting down and just listening to people explain passionately this thing they've created, and they're doing it in character, you know, which just adds another level to it. They're not just sitting there. I mean, sometimes you have to sit there and explain lore in just chunks, but
Yeah.
like sometimes it's in character. It's like this barkeeper mentions something like this, or this you see this stone on the side of the road with this written, and it's like these little sprinklings, which is also a DM thing. But I love being on the other side of that and just finding little things. I'm very much a completionist when it comes to video games. So
Mm.
that's like what I do. And so I very much I love that you guys enjoy the DMing side because I enjoy that you enjoy it because it makes me so much more happy as a player to see someone like go in and just really love what they're doing.
For sure. I was going to say, you mentioned about being sort of making notes and taking like really getting into the lore of someone else's world as a player, and that it sort of introduced me recently, or I've been introduced recently to like world building as a collaborative effort, and
Yeah.
giving your players that chance to, you know, they create their backstory, but giving them a little bit more leeway is something that I can't do because I'm the control freak GM. But I think that's really interesting is when you say like, "Hey, there's an NPC that you know, but we haven't talked about prior. What's their name or what do they look like?" And you give that little window of sort of opportunity for the player to then go, "Oh," like you put them on the spot a little bit, but if they're comfortable to do that, they can create something that's really interesting, and then they hold on to that fragment because it's this tiny little piece, but it's in your world, and then that means a lot
Mhm.
more to them. And it's like, oh, I created a part of that NPC, and it's like it wasn't, we didn't talk about it prior. I've now just made it up on the spot, and I feel like people really connect with something like that quite a lot, and I feel like
I
that's a cool way to world build as a group and at the table. So that's really
yeah.
interesting.
I find it cool that a lot of TTRPGs like Mapamundi, which we
Mm,
played recently, um and like other games, like I know Daggerheart's coming out, and that's like a huge part of Daggerheart is that you build the world together. And it's not just the DM. So I really that's why like, you know, I love getting people's info and I love on my world because I love seeing everyone's perspectives because then I feel like my world's more authentic.
mhm.
Um, but sometimes it just gets a mess. So you do have to have the GM to kind of rein it in.
Definitely,
Um,
yeah.
but yeah.
um, Talking about, you kind of hit on it a little bit there, and we
Mm,
talked about it in the pre-talk. Secrecy from players, withholding some information from the
mm,
players. See, I'm a big believer in this too. It's often so tempting to overshare with the players, and I think when DMs do that, they get confused and believe they are telling a better story by oversharing, but when in fact it's really spoiling the story, and you don't really give a chance to the players to tell the story naturally. And you mentioned that in Gothica there are things set up in this regard. I believe,
yes,
if I read that right.
yeah. You did, yes. So there's definitely some sort of set pieces throughout the world, but regards to secrecy, I would love and really encourage GMs to take, I mean, if they want to, it adds another sort of level of difficulty to the game. But I think if people are willing and players are willing, then I think people should be up for it. Is to when you give someone a mutation or read, that there's a disease, give them symptoms rather than names, because I want a lot of diseases and things to have overlapping symptoms. So then when you go to cure something, if you think it's disease X and it's actually disease Y, well, disease Y might not work. The cure for disease X might actually, make disease Y worse or push it further along the mutation scale. So instead of just saying, oh, you have disease Y, give them the symptoms of disease Y, and then they say, oh, okay, we can treat it because that's what we think it is. But if they haven't done their research and they haven't prepared, then they could actually be doing more harm than good. And I think that adds like a lot of like stuff that original D&D doesn't really give you. No, D&D is the sort of simplistic, especially 5e. It's the very simplistic, it's the cut and dry of like, here's your answers, here's your combat play. It depends on the GM and how they tell their story, but I feel a lot of the things are they're simplistic, and I think this gives that chance of, okay, well, we need to spend time. We can't just suddenly turn up. There's a sick person, we cure it with cure wounds, or you throw the magical spell at it, it fixes it. It's like, okay, we need to make sure we're curing it correctly. We're acquiring the right ingredients, or we're doing the right procedure. And of course, if people don't want that next level, you can just say, hey, it is disease X or Y, and then they still know what they need to do, and then they can still go along that journey of fixing that person, curing that person. So that level of secrecy, I think is super interesting because it makes the players get involved and then involve themselves in the world and chase symptoms and answers more than be handed the answers, and then they look at the sheet where it says, oh, you scroll down or you look down and think, there it is. You go over to the table, there's the cure. Right, we just need that cure. Whereas if they're told the symptoms and it's okay, it could be any number of these diseases, we need to investigate further. So it creates that little bit of like extra push the players to do something, which is cool to me
Yeah,
anyway.
I think it's so cool. I mean, as a biology student, that's kind of what I do in
Yeah.
labs and stuff. So it's so
you
cool
you
that
could be really good.
in the fantasy world because gosh, it sounds so fun. Um, I had a quick question about that. I know earlier you mentioned that you were trying to stay away from like real life, like diseases and stuff. But are there any like cures, like ways people have like cured in like folklore or like in new research coming out? Are there any cures and like way people have treated diseases in the past that you've took inspiration from?
Um, Again, I've not sort of fully looked into this, but it's definitely the way I want to go down it. So I want to, especially with Victorian age, you have that nice split of there's lots of new technology to play with, but there's also that there's still a lot of people who follow a faith and that sort of
Mhm.
magic side of things. So I want there to be an answer in sort of written in faith and technology. So there's the ways to say, I'm going to cure it with science, or I am going to cure it with magic. I want the magic to still be sort of limited. I don't want it to be the cure-all spell, and I don't the same for the thing. I don't want there to be the vaccine that cures all plagues. Um,
Yeah.
and I will be definitely looking into lots of Victorian procedures. I mean, I've done that sort of basically for inspiration as well, but I think it was sort of I followed that briefly before when looking up sort of creating like the alchemy sort of system. So I wanted to see
Oh, okay.
how and like what they sort of provided and what sort of types of medicine they were using. So there's lots of salves and things rather than, pills. There's lots
Yeah.
of treatments like you can treat the skin with ointments and things, and it's like lots of homemade remedies. So
Hmm.
there's a lot there, and once I like get into that sort of the real gritty part of the symptoms of each disease, that's the part I'm going to be researching the most for sure.
Yeah. That's gonna be really cool. Yeah, I was just wondering if you had done that already or not. I couldn't remember if I read anything while reading I knew you did some alchemy stuff, but I didn't know
Yeah.
if you had more knowledge in your brain
uh, Not
about
yet.
it.
It's
That is
only
so
very
cool. I
lightly.
can't wait to see it.
We're gonna come back in
Yeah,
a few
thank you.
months, and he's gonna be a full blown alchemist from the Victorian era. He's
Yeah,
gonna know. He's gonna know it all.
yeah, yeah. I
But
get
Yeah,
my
yeah.
doctorate as
Well,
well.
I have this book here literally sitting on my desk. Yes.
but that goes that kind of is a good transition into the immersion, which we were already kind of hinting at. Uh,
Hmm.
and immersion being like a major part of any storytelling. You said your background is not really more writing novels or the whole writing. It's
Mhm.
more like building a game, building world within TTRPGs. But it's still important within video games, TTRPGs, novels. You need to engage the senses and gently lead players along this magical journey with you uh, in wordplay and solid consistency. That's often very hard task to complete, even with the most experienced DM. So, how do you create the sense of immersion within Gothica?
Okay, it's a difficult question. um, one
Chandler's on
way I'm
fire.
yeah, yeah, it's good. Making me think. Um, there's one way that I want to approach it, and because we have this lovely Victorian saying, and just if you quickly Google that, you see there is fantastic fashion at that time. And as I said, I was sort of looking to Georgian, and the big difference is they wear pretty vastly different clothing. So they have that sort of the era that we would go through now. You know, you have like the flared jeans, and then we have the skinny jeans, and it's like the same thing. They would wear, flamboyant clothes, and then they go a bit more sensible and regal. So just by thinking, oh, okay, if Gothica is Victorian inspired, should I include some sort of cosmetic side to the game? And again, D&D mostly has armor and stuff, and they assume that sometimes when you go to bed or whatever, you take your armor off. Most of the time, your armor class would drop, but then that's when your GM isn't targeting you because it's unfair. So I thought, well, let's make that unfair part really clear. And so there's a whole section where you get to play dress up as Victorian characters. There's going to be lots of different cosmetic items, and then that introduces the appearance rating. So I took this a little bit from Call of Cthulhu because they have the appearance rating, and that gives you the chance to
Okay.
yes,
I think I know what you're talking about now. Okay, yeah.
okay, yeah. So it kind of ripped off from there, but it's integrated into D&D as much as possible. And it's there to kind of give everyone just a heads up of what they currently appear as. So there's sort of modifiers of your cleanliness. Are you covered in blood or dirt, mud? So you might be wearing really fancy clothes, but if you are completely like if you look a complete wreck, you might not still get into the party that you're trying to get into. But same as, you could be really clean but in poorer clothes, and the guards might not let you into certain districts of towns because, hey, guess what? You don't look the part. And I wanted to separate that from, yes, you have your D&D adventure, but you also have, hey, if you need to do more social aspects. And I basically the whole point is you're going to take the armor off because you're going to the ballroom or the ball party, and people aren't going to be letting you in if you have chainmail on or plate armor unless you're one of the guards. And it's like if you're supposed to be there to attend the party, well, then you have to dress appropriately. And so this whole system, it just makes sure that it basically allows that because it's going to play quite a good part of the social aspect. So to engage the players and interact them in the world, it's okay, well, choose your outfit, you know, take the armor off and say, okay, you can piece your clothing and your outfit together piece by piece, or you can just do like I'm wearing a suit, a three-piece suit, if you don't want to be too descriptive, or if you're not,
Mhm.
if that part of the game doesn't really inspire you, you can just say I'm wearing fancy clothes, and then you get your plus
Yeah.
whatever. But if you want to customize your character, like the dress up game that
Yes, the
most
Barbie
people,
dress-up game.
yes,
Yes,
exactly, the
this is
Barbie
what I'm
Victorian
hearing.
dress up game. That
Yes,
basically,
I love it.
yeah, it lets you, and then it forces social interaction, but it also forces you to be a lot more careful because just because you're at this fancy soiree doesn't mean you are not in danger. Because where there's fancy parties, there's people that want to get the people who are the fancy people. So you could be in between a lord and an assassin, and you are now suddenly your armor class is dropped by 8 points because you're not wearing your heavy armor. And it's like, oh, but I'm a paladin,
Mhm.
and now I feel very vulnerable in my suit instead of my suit of armor. So that I think helps the immersion of, hey, you're playing in a world that favors flamboyancy and social sort of conducts of like different levels. So if at some point you have to go into these richer parties or these big flamboyant parties, these the sort of chance you get to um but it brings you down to a more normal sort of citizen level, and you're not these wandering heroes everywhere, which I think definitely immerses the player a lot more into a world where it's like, oh, I'm more in the world than this godlike. human walking around smiting everything whenever I want.
Brings a sense of humility to the player.
Yes.
And also, yeah, that's a good way to describe how players need to be socially aware if the DM really wants to go into that and like lead them down this path. Because we were just talking about Critical Role. What was the episode that Chetney went to the ball in a sack? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, it caused the scene, but so, but it creates. There's consequences to this, and yeah, I'm a big believer in consequences.
Yes.
You can't just like my very first D&D experience. Thinking I'm a bit ashamed to say this. My first 5 minutes within a D&D campaign as a player, and first time I ever played anything, I got drunk and threw rubbish on a guard.
Hey, that's
Luck-
exactly what my brother did when we played D&D for the first time. So, no shame. Well, I'm calling out my brother right now, so maybe there's a little bit of shame in
Well,
that.
no,
Yes,
I felt
fair.
shame, and luckily I had a DM who believed in consequences. So I was like, oh wait, I can do whatever I want,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
just like in real life, if I were to go outside, get drunk, and throw rubbish on a police officer, it's not like the dude's going to say, "Well, you roll a d20."
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like,
See how you go.
bro, good thing you rolled an 18 because I was totally going to arrest you.
Yeah.
So
That's amazing.
It also kind of reminds me of like when you're playing video games and you come to talk to this person and you're like covered in blood and they just don't react. It's like and you're like covered in blood and stuff. So I like the idea that you've added this mechanic to just like almost not necessarily spite, but be like, hey, if you were covered in blood and you came up talking to someone, that person would probably go the other direction, you know?
Exactly.
or even
Yeah.
the character creator sections of things, and like you're in a very serious game, and the character has like big like clown hair or something like that, and it's just like
Yeah.
make you die.
Yeah.
It's like, hail the champion of the kingdom. It's just like it's like, okay, all right, goofball.
Amazing.
But I besides that, I think we went through all the questions I had, at least. I mean,
Yeah.
this has been awesome.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it's
Now,
been totally
Elliot,
awesome.
do you have anything you want to talk about?
Yeah. This is
Specifically, because we've got stuff. This was kind of like how our how we thought of Gothica, but we're not the creators of Gothica. So is there anything specific that you want us to ask you or that you want to talk about?
Okay, so I have these cool little set pieces that I kind of sort of danced around earlier, and this definitely falls into the world building category. So
Mhm.
if you let me indulge you,
Of course. This is your time.
yeah,
Please.
brilliant. So what I wanted to say, the reasons of where did the plays come from? Why is there so many? Why are they here? There's lots of ideas that I'm still playing with, but for the majority of them, I have these things called plague hearts. So they are the sort of manifestation of the plague. They are the source, and they can either be a physical heart or sort of what's the other one? Not physical, like it's the
Metaphorical.
imagination. That's the one, metaphorical heart. So it could be if it's a nature-based plague that affects plants, it could be like a heart-shaped thing, but it's made of bark and twigs. But in the same instance, it could be the actual heart of like a dragon or a creature that was once plagued and potentially died to this plague, and now the heart stays in the location, sort of spewing out this plague. So these
Ah.
little chunks are artifacts that are placed around the world, and obviously, I'm not going to put them in any specific location. That's up to GMs to do. But I love the idea that these are almost instant sort of quest what's the word, quest objects. So if you have a few one-offs or a short campaign, you know you start in this town here and your mission is to venture on into the plague lands and slay this plague heart. And because that then links to a disease or plague, you then have that plague and all those monsters and that are associated with it, and all those mutations that are associated with it, and you can instantly just pick sort of one little thing like that and say, oh, I can build a campaign around this one sort of story-based item, but it's very much interactable with the players because it's the thing that they're going to destroy, or if they're evil, maybe consume, and they might grow an extra appendage, but they might also be super powered afterwards. It's up to them to decide. But basically, these little things are dotted around the world, and I want to really invest into making them, or writing as much about them as possible, linking them to a specific plague or disease, and then leaving them for players or GMs to sort of filter into the world as they please. And some might be lesser, and they might be, someone might be carrying it, and that could be someone that they're trying to sell it off to in the black market, off to a lord or lady, and then you stumble upon it. It trips out of their coat, and you think, oh, what's that? And you have to fight them for it, and you then have this thing, and it's like a really important story thing, but it's also a physical thing that the players can interact with, and I think that's pretty cool. But I'm just
That is
biased,
cool.
so
No,
Yeah, that is cool.
that is totally
Go
cool.
ahead.
Like
nice.
you're sitting there describing this, and my mind's going like, "Oh wow, okay, so there's these objects all around this world." First thing that popped in my head, like as a GM, I would love to take that and like maybe build like a sub-religious culture that gets a hold of this
Ooh,
thing,
that's
and
awesome.
yeah, and then like you talk about we've been hitting on the different arms, so like, what if this dude turns
Yeah,
blue and he turns into Stitch, just like like that,
yeah,
and like, but they believe it. It's funny, but at the same time, what if they treat it like it's
mm,
a religious object, and they take this heart, and you as the players, your objective is to go steal this or destroy it, whichever one you want to take it with. But now you have to
yeah.
go through this whole citadel of cultists.
Mm, I
So
love that.
Yeah.
That's so
My
cool.
first thought was like doing like maybe it's like the heart of like this monstrous land, and it's like not really it yeah, it's like an object in this monstrous land. And as you're traveling through this monstrous land, you're learning more about the plague. So in the end, if the players are clever enough, they don't have to fight the heart or whatever it is. They just have to like maybe put like some herbs on it and
Mm,
stuff. So there could also be like they're learning more about the plague and that would be more like a one-shot situation
mm,
where they go through and they learn more about the plague as they're fighting these monsters or they're talking to people so they can eventually get to the heart and stuff.
that's really
So
cool. I love that.
that
yeah, you
yeah,
you
that was
just
my first thought.
you just spawned so many different directions. So yes, GMs can take it multiple directions, like just like that.
That's
Two,
Yeah.
two
yeah,
things.
two different ideas. Yep,
Yeah.
that's so cool.
Which is I think the brilliance of Gothica is that you've made it
Mm,
so open and stuff for interpretation, but at the same time, you know, I'm gonna say this. Sometimes modules in TTRPGs give you too much and too little at the same time.
mm,
So I think the brilliance of your pre-release guide that you've put out and all the stuff you've put out is it gives you just enough, but then it's like here, now you can play with it. And
yeah.
it's like, oh, well, thank you. But there's enough in there where you can go, oh, I can take this and do this and this and this with it.
Mm,
So that's why Gothica I think is so cool is not specifically the setting, even though the setting is really cool, it's how you've written it that I really appreciate.
oh, that's awesome. I say, from someone who doesn't read books and has not done really any writing before, like I really appreciate that. So yeah,
Yeah.
super
Oh,
super
I
awesome to
think
hear.
it's great.
it is brilliant. In fact, I'm sitting here thinking like I got a one shot for some neighbors coming up, so I have no idea. I was trying to think of different things we could do. I was trying to think maybe I'll do the Iron Citadel thing again, which we've done here on the chat or in Ink Nights. Um, no, I may do something with Gothica.
Yeah,
So
please do. I'd love
so
to hear about it.
yeah, so yeah.
Nice.
My mind's going crazy with this whole plague
Isn't
heart
it
idea. So
Yeah, because
Mm.
isn't there like different like races and classes that you've come up with that are
Oh
Gothica
yeah,
based, like Plague Worlds
totally.
based?
So again, it's not just Victorian England. I wanted to sort of go into the folklore of England and like Europe as well, because it sort of connects a little bit when you go that far back. So
Mhm.
I've taken away elves currently. You obviously can play them if you wish, but there's no stats for elves. Um, But I've changed races slash species to bloodlines, and you get to choose between. You can have one, so you could be like a sort of a true lineage of that bloodline, and you get sort of this extra trait, or you can choose from two, as if your parents were from two different bloodlines. So then you get to mix and match. And something I'm sort of taking from Pathfinder is that you get things as you level up, so you get to pick traits from your bloodline. So the one thing again about races in D&D is like, hey, it's cool. You got all these different racial things. There's lots of lore, and it's people play their characters. Dwarf people have Scottish accents normally all the time. But in this sense, the bloodlines give you a chance to customize your character while you play. So every few levels, you get a new trait, and I think they're really cool. And yes, they might be sort of overpowered if you dropped that into a D&D game without other people using that, but because everyone's using it and the world is probably a lot more harsh and difficult with like the plagues, mutations, and like new afflictions, these little bonuses I think give people not only more choice, especially for like I'm a sucker for giving melee like classes like fighter and barbarian like more to do, because there's a friend I have who only plays barbarian, but if they don't hit on their turn, it's kind of like, okay, I will wait for the next turn. And it's like you just become the
Yeah.
punching bag.
And
It's
then
like,
if you have a wizard, it takes forever. A
Yeah.
wizard or
yes,
druid or cleric, it's like,
yeah,
well, I'm gonna sit here for 30 minutes while they take their turn.
yeah. So
And as
letting
someone who
people,
plays a druid, I'm not calling you guys out. I'm just admitting facts.
yeah,
It takes a while.
definitely.
Hey. Well, no, I'm a mage and paladin, so I'm back and forth.
Nice.
Yeah.
But
So yeah,
Yeah,
there's
but all the
the
stuff you
bloodlines.
create, cool.
Yeah, there's a lot of traits and things to pick from there, which is super exciting. There's I've separated the bloodlines into human because again, Victorian is a big part, so I wanted a large portion of the land to be sort of human controlled, but it's diverse with other humans and other species or bloodlines. So there's human bloodlines, which are there's 6 different types of humans. Then there's lineage, which is kind of like your traditional fantasy, but taking it more folklore. So you have like there's dwarves, but then there's like the dragonborn people are scaleborn, and they are like a bit more reptilian, so they're kind of more of an older people. There's the typical fishmen, which are the I'm forgetting deepborn, and they have the the name born just to keep it super simple for everyone, but they also have their fantasy sort of lore name. So if you are a GM that wants to get a little bit more like into it, there's the sort of scientific name, as it were, for each class as well. But I thought I would label them all
Latin
something.
name.
Yeah, everything's something born just to is ease of use for every player then. But yeah, there's
Yeah.
a lot of fun stuff there as well, which the pre-release guide
Goodness.
covers 6 of the 18 bloodlines. So yeah.
nice.
Oh, I love my favorite is the fiery. Is it fire or
Mm.
fiery?
I'm just doing fire. I put the Y in for
Fire. But you put the
just,
Y in, yeah.
just for dramatic
That's my
effect.
favorite. And
Oh,
I
nice.
really like those, and I want to play those. So,
They're pretty cool.
And
yeah.
so if we were
Oh,
looking to get our
goodness.
hands on this, where would we go to, Elliot?
The pre-release is over on Drive-Thru RPG. You might be able to find it, but it might be easier to find through a link if you could drop that somewhere at
Oh
the
yeah,
end.
that's what I was
Yes,
about
I
to
will put the links.
that's
Yeah,
what I was
Yeah.
about to get
awesome.
to.
Yeah,
We'll have the links in the description, but if
yeah,
if they're just
Yeah.
listening on podcast, they on Spotify right now, if they could just hear it like for later.
yeah. If you want to find a direct link, you'll probably find it through my Instagram, which is just InkBladePublishing, all one word. You can also find a lot of Gothica content. They'll have a link. There's also the link to the website, which is just inkbladepublishing.com. Um, and as Chandler had a little look through earlier, there's a lot of information about me, my sort of history, and there's a lot of information about like Gothica as an idea and a concept. So yeah, and hopefully at some point soon there will be a Kickstarter to follow. It's just the pre-launch page, and I'm thinking of getting the whole thing ready for like November this year. So
Oh, so
exciting times.
exciting.
Yeah,
We'll have to have you
So
back on
exciting.
once that happens.
definitely. I'll be
Yeah,
very
well,
happy to come back
definitely
on.
have to have you back on to talk more about your world and all the stuff that you have in your brain, because obviously you can't tell us everything, but I want
Nope.
to know everything.
Yeah. Again, I'm behind the DM screen. I want to know. I want to know this.
Mm.
But at the
Yes,
same time,
definitely.
you're
I want to share.
yeah, you want to share, but you can't overshare. We've already talked about this.
Yep.
But there's a lot of
Yes.
time in between. It's April
Oh,
now
goodness.
and November. Can't wait.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
we'll have to have
Oh
a
my goodness, that's gonna be
first
awesome.
first guest returning episode.
Awesome. I'll definitely
Yes.
jump on that.
All right.
Well, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a blast.
Yep.
Oh, I'm so glad.
I guess we'll sign out. I'm Nayruan.
Yeah, we'll sign off. I'm Plutach.
And I'm Elliot of InkBladePublishing.
Thank you guys. Until next time.
Yep.